You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 16th of January 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist in association with UBS. Live from London, this is The Globalist. I'm Emma Nelson. A very warm welcome to today's programme. Coming up.
Because at long last, I can announce a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas.
Finally, a ceasefire is agreed between Israel and Hamas. We'll analyse the details of the deal, the form it'll take, when it'll start and whether it'll hold. Also coming up on today's programme, we'll have the latest from South Korea as police use ladders and wire cutters to reach and arrest President Yoon, only for him to refuse to be interviewed. And
the Pope is dead. The throne is vacant.
The conclave begins now.
A film about the election of a pope leads the nominations at this year's BAFTA Awards. Plus the papers, the latest tech news, and we open the pages of our latest book, Greece, the Monocle Handbook. That's all coming up on The Globalist, live from London. First, a look at what else is happening in today's programme, in today's news, I should say. In his farewell address, the US President Joe Biden has warned of a dangerous oligarchy taking shape in America. The former Georgian Prime Minister and opposition party leader has been injured, reportedly by members of the ruling Georgian Dream Party. And firefighters in Los Angeles say persistently strong and dry winds are still fueling two giant wildfires. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on these stories. But first, after 15 months of pain, a ceasefire has been agreed between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. The deal, yet to be formally announced, includes an initial ending of hostilities lasting 6 weeks, the gradual withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, and the release of hostages held by Hamas in exchange for Palestinian detainees held by Israel. There have been celebrations in both Israel and Gaza as the ceasefire deal came to the public domain. And to tell us more about the latest developments, I'm joined in the studio by Yossi, Mekelberg, Senior Consultant Fellow at the programme at Chatham House, and Ksenia Svetlova, who's a former member of the Knesset and expert in Middle Eastern affairs, joins me down the line from Tel Aviv. A very good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Ksenia, can I bring you in first of all for your reaction? What's it been like in Israel and Tel Aviv in the last 24 hours?
Well, specifically in Tel Aviv, there is a jubilation, and it's a quiet jubilation because too many hostages have died in the captivity of Hamas, and we don't know in what state they're coming, but still there is a sense of relief. Finally, there is a deal, and but this is not what many other Israelis in other parts of the country are feeling. And specifically, if we are talking about the divide, the deep divide in Israeli society between the supporters of Netanyahu and those who oppose him, well, it was very clear today. So there is a sense of partial relief, maybe, and there is a lot of ambiguity about what's coming next and whether the deal will be consumed till the end. This is something that it's currently unclear.
It is one of the key issues there, Yossi, isn't it? Because just to add a little bit of context and a framework to this, there are 3 phases to this deal, but only the first part has been agreed.
I think the first part has been agreed, and it's come into effect on Sunday. And there are some technical hitches and everyone jockeying for position just to improve some of the details. But yes, that will be going to be the great test, whether from phase 1 that it's successful, whether it creates some momentum into moving to the second phase, because this will include the release of the rest of the hostages. And equally important is end of war, because this will entail that this war is over, and then you need to move to something else and to look at what the Israeli government and almost everyone try to avoid, looking for the day after. And now there is a small gap there to think about the day after.
Ksenia, whose victory is this? Because both Israel and Hamas have failed in their aims.
Well, in Israel, it certainly doesn't feel like a victory. And I can tell you that the person who actually announced the Israeli people of the upcoming deal was no other but the Prime Minister of Qatar. His press conference was broadcasted live on every Israeli channel, and I have to remind you that the Qatari news channel Al Jazeera is actually blocked in Israel. So this is something that it's a bit ridiculous that the Israeli Prime Minister is unable to address his people in this fateful night and to say to them, listen, we've reached a deal. It's not a perfect deal, but this is a deal that will allow us to save our people from the captivity of Hamas and from this torture that is being ongoing for over a year. So it doesn't, certainly from the governmental circles, certainly doesn't feel this way. And there is a lot of talk of actually Trump twisting an arm of Netanyahu. So this is a deal that the government is obliging to fulfill unwillingly. And can tell you certainly after such a long war, and also the loss of human lives, also both the hostages and the soldiers who are fighting in Gaza. I can tell you that listening to President Joe Biden yesterday, who said very clearly, this is the deal that I put on the table in May. In May of 2024, we could have already back home our hostages. We could have already home the soldiers that died probably for nothing there.
What's happened here then, Yossi, in terms of pulling levers to make sure that Netanyahu says yes? Ksenia has just used the words obligingly, fulfilled unwillingly. She mentioned two areas that have exerted pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu. Firstly, his domestic political situation. But secondly, there's quite a lot of coverage in the press today saying that it was Trump who really pushed him.
I think in the balance of fear for Netanyahu between his right-wing members of coalition and Trump, the Trump factor played a bigger role. Because, as Ksenia just said, this deal could have been agreed back in May, saving so many lives on the Israeli side and on the Palestinian side. And brought all this process forward many months ago. But Netanyahu's fear of the right-wing coalition, of the member of the Ben Gvir and the Smotrich, that they would leave the coalition, led him to continue the war. It's not that Hamas is exactly an easy partner to negotiate with, but there were opportunities there. And it was actually Secretary of State Antony Blinken that gave, after Biden's speech, gave the game away, saying, yeah, it was to a large extent Netanyahu blocking it to keep the coalition going. And Ben Gvir himself urged Netanyahu, let's continue what we have done so well so far by blocking any ceasefire agreement. And this changed because it's not only, I think, Israel and others. Everyone think what Trump would like to happen and align themselves what they think Trump wants. On this one, Trump was very clear. He wanted, before he entered next week to the White House, that this war is over.
And Ksenia, this is not a ceasefire which has come into effect immediately, is it? We have it ostensibly starting on Sunday, and that has not stopped Israeli bombardments of targets in Gaza overnight.
Yes, absolutely. We have some reports that over 40 people have died in Gaza just this night as a result of the airstrikes. And there are negotiations that are ongoing about an attempt on behalf of the Qataris and the Egyptians to make the deal start today. The ceasefire start today, while the hostages will be released. The first bulk of the hostages will be released on Sunday. This is not concluded yet. And I think that just on the contrary, the Prime Minister is willing to show, first of all, his constituency, his base, that the war is not over. This is what every person on the right wing is saying today. Well, maybe we'll release some hostages. In any case, it's a long deal. It's 42 days long deal, and everything can go wrong during these days. And don't worry, we will resume the war. We do hear these things, not from official spokesman of Netanyahu, but from his very close circle, from reporters who support him, from some people around him. So this is the unspoken promise of the Prime Minister to his base and to his coalition. Don't worry about it. We have to do what we have to do, but we will resume this war. And yes, we continue to bomb Gaza also overnight.
Yossi, what are the chances of this holding?
I think there are good chances of that, but it's not guaranteed because, as Ksenia says, there are some forces, by the way, on both sides that are not interested. Because when this war is over, it will be also a time of reckoning. How did we get into the last 50 months? From October 7, the failure there, also this war that will leave a horrific legacy in both society and the relations between the two societies. So something that the war should continue almost indefinitely. And as we can see, they always can find some targets. And, when mentioned 40 other tragedies because people are killed. But I think, again, the American factor, unlike, like or loathe Donald Trump, I think people listen to him in a way that the Biden administration was so weak in trying to impose a ceasefire, and this was very costly. Now it's different, and as long as this is, Netanyahu can go, as he did many times during his premiership, go and say, I don't do it because I want to do it, but we can't fall out with our main backer, then there is a chance of this to hold.
Ksenia, let's focus on what's going to happen in Gaza. There is, under the terms of the initial part of the ceasefire, more aid will go in, but in the longer term, firstly, what is left of Gaza? What have people got to go back to if and when they can go back in? But much, much further down the line is who is going to govern Gaza?
Well, this is the $1 billion question, because this is how much the aid to Gaza will cost eventually, because we have to rebuild basically everything. Critical infrastructure was destroyed, most of the houses, about 75%. And I saw yesterday some videos of Gazans in the south celebrating the deal and expressing their will to go back to their homes. Well, they don't know that their homes are no longer there. There are no homes that you can live in the northern Gaza. And we've seen the footage that was provided by the IDF and also by Gazans themselves. It's not a livable place. So that's a huge tragedy. Unfortunately, Israeli government didn't use the time of the war in order to prepare for the next step. The day after tomorrow, there was always something very remote. We don't know when it will happen. And in any case, there is nobody that we like. This is according to the Israeli government that can govern Gaza. Yes, they rejected Palestinian autonomy. Hamas is out of the question. Then whom? The preference of the mainstream in Israel is, for some Arab country to take charge of Gaza. But that definitely will not happen, because you have to listen carefully to the Arabs. They are saying they recognize the Palestinian autonomy, and this is the authority, and they have to come into Gaza. Now, they cannot do it today or tomorrow. Nothing is ready. Nothing is ripe. And the war is not over yet. I just have to remind everyone that we are in the ceasefire will probably start today or in 3 days, but that's a ceasefire. It's not the end of war. And nothing. Yeah.
And sorry to interrupt you, but just looking at what happens now to Hamas, Yossi. Israel wanted the destruction of Hamas. The agreement of a ceasefire wipes that chance out because it presupposes Hamas's continued existence. What now for them? Because they hoped that October the 7th would create some sort of collapse within Israel, or at least sort of trigger some sort of uprising or backing from Iran. Neither have happened here. So what do they do?
I think Hamas, of course, weakened the Palestinian position generally, in their own position. They are weakened military force as a result of the war. And the axis of resistance didn't come to their help in the way that they expected. So again, there will be a time of reckoning within the Palestinian society. At the end of the day, it's for the Palestinians to decide who is leading them. And yes, there is no mechanism, no structures right in place to govern Gaza. That's what needs to be done while there are the negotiations on implementing the first phase and negotiating the second phase, to start working on this mechanism. At the end of the day, we have to go back and see how the West Bank and Gaza are united under one governing body. It has to be elected by the Palestinians, and there is a need for close involvement by regional powers.
Yossi Mekelberg here in London and Ksenia Svetlova on the line from Tel Aviv. Thank you both for joining me on The Globalist. You're with Monocle Radio. It's 16:15 in Seoul and 7:15 a.m. here in London, and we head to South Korea now to get the latest on the arrest and detention of the South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol. He faces charges of insurrection following an attempt to impose martial law. The country's anti-corruption agency says it intends to resume questioning the president today. His representatives have said this is not happening. Well, to tell us more and bring us up to date, I'm joined now by Stephen Borowick, who's Nikkei Asia staff writer and editor in Seoul. A very good afternoon to you, Stephen.
Good afternoon.
So we had scenes of drama in the last 48 hours as wire cutters and ladders were used to access the president.
Yeah, there sure were, but it did lead to something of a breakthrough in that Yoon became the first South Korean president in history to be arrested while still formally holding office. And then he was taken to a questioning facility where I believe he spent the night. And then, yeah, as you said in the intro, his representative said that he would not go through with a questioning session that had been scheduled for today. And the initial warrant that he was arrested under allows him to only be held for 48 hours. So the investigative authorities can apply to extend that. But it does seem now that, even though he was arrested, even though there was some kind of a breakthrough there, it seems like things are still moving ahead very, very slowly, and we don't know when there'll be some kind of a real resolution to all of this.
It is more than a month since he momentarily declared martial law. It happened in a matter of hours and then vanished. And yet this sort of catalogue of resistance has really sort of drawn things out. Do we know why President Yoon Suk Yeol is refusing at every single stage?
Well, it's probably useful to remind listeners that Yoon is a legal professional. He spent his whole career as a prosecutor, so he knows the ins and outs of the law pretty well. And his lawyers have steadfastly claimed that the investigation against him is invalid, it's illegal, and they've made some pretty reasonably compelling legal arguments. I mean, they've said that this body that is investigating him does not have the jurisdiction to carry out an investigation on charges of insurrection. They've said that, they used a kind of similar legal defense when they were trying to prevent his home and his residence from being searched. They said that it was a place that could be harboring state secrets, and so they had a kind of legal grounds to refuse that. Yoon, he gave a televised, a recorded message that was televised yesterday where he continued to say that he believes that there is no real legal basis for the charges against him, and that he plans to continue fighting and all the rest. It remains to be seen how compelling the relevant authorities in the courts will find that. An interesting thing has happened where it seems as though his resistance has really mobilized his kind of hardcore supporters who have held rallies near his place. But if you look at poll data, the majority of South Korea is still in favor of removing him from office and still feels that his short-lived attempt at martial law was a bad move.
So what happens now? Because we have a refusal to cooperate with investigators today on the part of Yoon. However, the Constitutional Court is holding a second hearing in his impeachment trial. So we have almost sort of two parallel narratives happening here.
Yeah, and it's important to note that those are two separate things. The Constitutional Court is ruling on whether or not to uphold or reject the lawmakers' vote to impeach him, which took place on December 14th, and they've got 6 months to do that. And Yoon is also snubbing that. He's refused to attend that. And then in parallel to that, we have this other investigation where Yoon is facing the very serious charge of insurrection. And so Yoon is on both fronts. He's kind of painting himself as a victim and saying that this is some kind of a witch hunt and these folks are all out to get him, and he was really just trying to protect South Korean democracy. It's above my pay grade to say whether or not there's any truth to those claims, but the relevant authorities will definitely have their say on this sooner or later. The question is just how long and how arduous of a process this country has to go through before we get any clarity on those questions.
Stephen Borowick on the line from Seoul. Thank you so much for joining us on Monocle Radio. Still to come on today's programme.
When I was meeting people in Greece, I was just looking for things that made them excited about their country.
We open the pages of our latest book, Greece, the Monocle Handbook. Stay tuned.
UBS has over 900 investment analysts from over 100 different countries.
Over 900 of the sharpest minds and freshest thinkers in the world of finance today.
To find out how we could help you,
contact us at ubs.com.
Let's continue now with today's newspapers. Joining us from our Zurich studio is Juliet Linley, journalist and former Vatican correspondent. Good morning, Juliet. Good morning, Dufourstrasse 90. How are things looking where you are?
Good morning, Emma, from Dufourstrasse, where I am here with the wonderful Desiree Bandley behind the controls here in the radio studio. All is good.
Marvellous. Warm wishes to Desi and warm wishes to Zurich. What's happening in the news?
Let's start with the Swiss media. It's all over the main newspapers as well as TVs and radio stations. Our defense chief has stepped down. She is the country's first female defense minister. She's 62-year-old Viola Amherd of the Centre Party. And she stepped down after being in government for 6 years. Rumours had been swirling that she would be doing so. But yesterday she announced it after she had wrapped up the rotating Swiss presidency at the end of December. So certainly the right-wing People's Party, the country's leading party, had been extremely critical of her and had called for her to go, saying she had failed to revitalise the army and that Switzerland should return to its comprehensive neutrality. Emma, let's not forget that Amherd steered the Swiss Defence Ministry during 6 crucial years that included the Alpine nation adopting EU sanctions vis-à-vis Moscow. And that was in the aftermath of the Ukraine invasion, and it sparked a flurry of debate regarding Switzerland's traditional non-partisan neutral position. Now, interestingly, 3 years on, the debate has subsided. I mean, Switzerland remains staunchly neutral. 90% of its population backs this position. And it has to be said, Amherd has approved closer cooperation with NATO, and during her tenure, she boosted military spending far more than had been predicted. But at the same time as her stepping down, the Swiss cabinet was putting forward a proposal for women to possibly be obliged to do military service. Now, Emma, this is interesting because currently they can enroll on a voluntary basis, but all men, Swiss men, aged between 18 to 30, are required to do 21 weeks of basic military service, followed by every year you've got to do training throughout adulthood. So just FYI, they do get paid 80% of their salaries. Foreigners are exempt, but in this overhaul of the military, that too might be changing. The question is who will replace Amherd? I'll let you know closer to the time, but there might be another female defense minister. It's still not clear, and I'm not going to get into the weeds of that right now, Emma.
No, and by all accounts, if you look around, there are sort of the radical liberals are calling for a clear plan. They're all looking for action in national defence following Amherd's resignation. I think the Swiss People's Party say that Amherd's successor must revitalise the army. The Liberal Greens are saying that a fresh start needs to be called here. There are calls here for some sort of change and some sort of shake-up, given the fact that she has been in post for, a decade?
Yeah, 6 years. Yes, no, there are absolutely calls for change. Now, of course, who will be the next minister also depends on Switzerland's very delicate balance of which language area you're from in Switzerland, which party you're from. So you've got to take that into account. She's from French-speaking Switzerland, so unlikely that the female candidate who would be from Fribourg would be chosen because of her being a francophone. let's see. Possibly a German-speaking male might be in position. Interesting how these positions are allocated in this country, isn't it, Emma?
It is. Let's move on to an article in the Financial Times that you wanted to draw our attention to, accompanying a headline of fires prompt soul searching at Hollywood's dream factories. There are some devastating pictures of what's happened in the likes of Malibu, with fires still raging. By all accounts, the area devastated now is the size of Washington, D.C.
Yeah, frightening to think about it that way. We're going to look at the fact that we're seeing a lot of, in the media, a lot of stars doing fundraisers and showing their sympathy for the displaced. Studios, movie studios are donating millions to emergency response and rebuilding efforts. But the film industry's prospects are in question, just when the studios had been hoping that they could put their woes over the last years behind them. So, Emma, in this FT article, they're saying how it was just 2 days before the fires in California broke out that we were watching the Golden Globes Awards, glam parties, Demi Moore's age-defying looks were all over the place. There was chatter about Zendaya's engagement ring, but now LA's most celebrated industry is in shock, and uncertainty abounds about how and when the U.S. movie world will recover. Think about it. Hollywood over the last years was dogged by streaming rivalries, the strikes, the industry strikes. Before that, a pandemic that shut down movie theaters, production, everything if you want. And while today Disney, Sony and Warner Brothers haven't had their studios damaged by the fires, shooting has been halted on most productions, with certain studios saying they're monitoring the fires, hoping to be up and running soon, not clear when. Then there's the Oscars. How and will they be held? They should be in March. So far, the voting period for nominations has been pushed back twice. Luncheons for nominees due in February have been scrapped. So executives are trying to stay optimistic. But what if this is the final straw for Hollywood and it loses its allure altogether as the place to make movies and money? I mean, tax incentives in other states had already been denting business, FT writes, in California and across the border in Canada. You've got British Columbia, they've got tax credits with incentives for big productions that are over, say, $200 million. And the weaker Canadian dollar. Plus, remember, Canadians have a powerful filmmaking infrastructure. So, Emma, no wonder there is so much trepidation in LA at the moment with everything that is happening there.
Thank you for that. We shall follow that as the big questions are being asked about the general future of Los Angeles and indeed of Hollywood, whether this is being seen as a moment when people actually leave. Let's head to Swiss Info for our final item. I don't know about me. It's January, so in theory no one's eating chocolate. And if you're not eating chocolate, it might be because you're injecting yourself with a funny drug that makes you thin. Cocoa prices are going up. I mean, if you're Lindt, are you racking? You sort of like wringing your arms and in the middle of crisis, or is this just a temporary blip?
Well, here's the thing. At Mondelez, which makes Cadbury's chocolates, and Hershey's that makes these, the Hershey's Kisses in the US, they're seeing lower sales and volumes that have been dented by maybe cash-strapped consumers not wanting to spend too much of their hard-earned dollar on chocolates. But hey, in the world of the golden chocolate bunnies and the creamy Lindor chocolate bowls, things are a little bit different. Customers are still going and buying those, and they're even paying higher prices for those bunnies and bowls. So the Zurich-based conglomerate Lindt has reported a rise in profits. And that's despite what you mentioned, a spike in cocoa prices and what they call subdued consumer sentiment, possibly linked to weight loss drugs like Wegovy, as you talked about. So the chocolate maker bucked trends by maintaining volumes amid a broader slowdown in the chocolate market. And how they've done it is by passing on higher ingredient costs to customers. So isn't that interesting? And the reason higher cocoa prices have been seen is they're multifaceted, but mainly it's because of adverse weather conditions in key regions with cocoa plantations, as well as tree illnesses, apparently, and capacity shortages. At the same time, as of December 31st, the chocolate giant that is based just across the lake from us, Desi and I can look out the window here at the Dufourstrasse studio and see Kilchberg across the lake. They reported an 18% rise in income to $750 million. So interesting. And they are saying that it perhaps might be linked to the post-COVID recovery, which has seen so many people traveling more and therefore jumping at the chance to buy these rather expensive pralines at airports at the duty-free as they're going through.
Juliet Linley, coming from a country that cannot resist a creamy chocolate ball or two, thank you so much for joining us on the line from Zurich. The time here in London is just nudging 7:30. You're listening to The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. Let's have a look at some of today's other news headlines. In his farewell address, the US President Joe Biden has warned of a dangerous oligarchy taking shape in America. He said that the grouping of extreme wealth, power and influence really threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms. Meanwhile, 6 of President-elect Donald Trump's picks for cabinet have faced questions at their confirmation hearings ahead of votes on their nominations. Trump's pick for Attorney General, Pam Bondi, pledged to maintain the Justice Department's independence and end what she called weaponization. The Florida Senator Marco Rubio said that if he were elected as Secretary of State, he would put American interests first. The former Georgian Prime Minister and opposition party leader Georgia Gakaria has been injured, reportedly by members of the ruling Georgian Dream Party. Gakaria is thought to have broken a nose in the attack at a hotel on the Black Sea coast. Protests have been held since Georgian Dream announced they were freezing the opening of talks on joining the European Union. And firefighters in Los Angeles say persistently strong and dry winds are still fueling 2 giant wildfires. The fires, which have been described as the worst disaster in the city's history, have been raging for 8 days, and 6.5 million people remain under a critical fire threat. The fires have consumed an area nearly the size of Washington, D.C. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. 8:32 in Brussels, 7:32 here in London. Now, the leadership of the centre-right European Conservatives and Reformist Party has changed hands. The Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has transferred the reins to Poland's former Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki. While Marta Lorimer is a lecturer in politics at Cardiff University. Welcome back to Monocle Radio. Good morning, Marta.
Good morning, Emma.
So let's just establish where the European Conservatives and Reformists lie within the hemicycle in Europe. They are a group of what's often described as a soft Eurosceptics, but is that position hardening?
Well, the European Conservatives and Reformists are quite an interesting party group. They are a mixed bag in terms of their positions on the European Union. They tend to portray themselves, though, as a constructive Eurosceptic force within the European Parliament. They are more right-wing than the European People's Party, so I'm not sure I would qualify them as centre-right. But they are more moderate than the 2 groups to their side, so the Patriots for Europe. And then the very far-right Europe of sovereign nations.
And indeed, the transfer, therefore, of the leadership from the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, when she's handing it to Poland's former Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, he is from the Law and Justice Party, which had a very tight populist grip on Poland.
Exactly. So the Law and Justice Party is a much more Eurosceptic political force. And one of the reasons for that, of course, is that they were in power for 8 years in Poland and picked a lot of fights with the European Union, particularly when it comes to a reform of the judiciary that they were trying to implement. Whereas Giorgia Meloni has certainly not presented herself with great pro-European credentials, but she has done her best not to pick fights with the EU in her time in power.
So what is the ambition of now? What do we think the ambition of the European Conservatives and Reformists will be now that it's changed hands to a harder, more populist view?
I don't think that the change in leadership really changes much. The ECR group really prides itself in not having strong party discipline, so letting its members vote with their heart. And I think that is still going to be the case even with Morawiecki as its leader. What I do think a broader goal is for the party is to continue trying to influence EU politics and what the Commission does by showing themselves as willing to compromise and bring their votes to measures that the Commission is trying to pass.
Tell us more about how populists sort of come together within Europe. We saw a rise in the number of people voting for them in the European elections last year. We are seeing populism rising, established in the likes of Hungary, Slovakia. Poland has lost power, but is still a very, very powerful voice. We're looking at what's happening in Austria as well. There is this idea that populists are unhappy about the same things. However, the way that they wish to solve the problems that they see are very, very different. So one wonders, when you do have someone like Mateusz Morawiecki coming in to the European Conservatives and Reformists, what that might do to the populist voice in terms of unification.
So the far right in the European Parliament has historically had a very difficult time coming together. Initially, they couldn't even form a single group. The first time they managed to do this successfully since 1989 was, in fact, in 2015 with the Europe of Nations and Freedom. And now they are currently divided in 3 different groups. So we've been talking so far about the European Conservative and the Reformists group, who are a Eurosceptic conservative group originally founded by the British Conservatives because they found the EPP to be too Europhile. Then you have the Patriots for Europe group, which is the biggest group in the parliament. This has people like Orban in it, Marine Le Pen, and Italy's Lega Nord. And then you have the Europe of Sovereign Nation group, which is the group that was considered so extreme by everyone else that no one wanted to have anything to do with them. So that's kind of the state of play. And it's true that they have very similar ideas, but they choose to be divided in different groups for a variety of reasons, most of them having to do with their image. So a lot of them are worried about their domestic perception, and they are worried that if they ally with groups that are perceived as being too extreme, this is going to have negative repercussions at home. So Marine Le Pen, for example, has refused to sit in the same group as the Alternative for Germany because she thought that would be very negative for her. Something similar can be said for Giorgia Meloni. She doesn't want to be in the same group with Marine Le Pen because she knows that if she is in that group, this might be negatively perceived at home, and it is also going to prevent her from working with the EPP. So it's really, there's a series of considerations where these parties have very similar ideas overall, but they have different, I would say, strategic priorities in terms of what they're doing in the European Parliament.
Where do the European Conservatives and Reformers sit with all this, given the fact that we're looking at an election in February in Germany where Alternative für Deutschland, the Alternative for Germany party, is expected to do well and has enjoyed astonishing publicity in the last couple of weeks thanks to Elon Musk. But it is not long since the AfD were thrown out of the European Conservatives and Reformists.
Well, they weren't in the European Conservative and Reformists. They were in the group that is now the Patriots. So that is the group that they were thrown out of. And in fact, it has been a controversial issue whether they should be let back in or not. And again, this opposed basically the Austrian Freedom Party to the National Rally, because Marine Le Pen said, I am not going to go into an election, a presidential election, sitting in the same group as the AfD. Whereas for the Freedom Party of Austria, they were actually quite keen to have them back in the same group because it would give them more clout. So again, there are divisions within these parties on how to manage their relationships with other groups. I don't think that the AfD doing particularly well is going to help them get into the Patriots group for now, because their reputation is still fairly toxic, even by far-right standards.
Marta Lorimer, thank you so much for joining me on Monocle Radio. The 2025 BAFTA Film Award nominees have been announced. The papal thriller Conclave and musical Emilia Perez clinched the most opportunities to take home an award. First-time nods abounded. A myriad genres secured major nominations, and there were some A-list snubs to divide the movie lovers. On Monocle's Anita Riotta spoke to the senior correspondent Fernando Augusto Pacheco about the BAFTAs, and she first asked him what sets this year's nominations apart.
My first word here is fun. I do think the list this year is very fun because, we have a papal thriller that is quite gossipy, which is Conclave, of course, nominated for 12 categories there. And I think it's an excellent film. And as I said, it's more fun than I was expecting. And also The Substance, which is kind of a horror talking about aging Hollywood. So I do think the films this year, they are non-conventional, if I may say. So I think that was kind of the surprise of this year's list at the BAFTAs.
I love that. I love if fun is the theme of this year's BAFTAs. Before we get really into the meat of the nominations themselves, for our audience, is there anything that tends to set the BAFTAs apart from its peers, such as the Golden Globes or the Oscars?
I have to say that before 2020, and I'll explain why, the BAFTAs felt very conventional to me. Of course, there was more attention to British film. Of course, we're here in London, But the thing is, in 2020, they nominated an all-white list for the acting categories there, which was a big shock to the industry. But to be fair with the BAFTAs, after that, they really looked very deeply into the institution, and they've added, I believe, 1,000 voters from all sorts of backgrounds of different races and everything. And that was reflected in the nominations in the previous year. So some say that it's more radical than the Golden Globes and the Oscars. Radicals in the sense that there are more surprises, more diversity. So there's been a big change at the BAFTAs, I have to say.
And do you think that this might be what is injecting this sense of fun that you're getting from the nominations? Are we just seeing more fun material? Is it the diverse nomination process? What do you think?
It's a mix. It's a mix of those. And I have to say, it's not just because of the BAFTAs. It's been a fun year with films. So you see this in other award ceremonies as well. So I think, and that's great, because I think, we shouldn't just award perhaps just a conventional drama. That's not what audiences want, So as I said, look at Emilia Paris. It is a little bit of a divisive film for some. It doesn't work for everyone. But look, it's a musical about a trans kind of cartel mobster in Mexico. It's a fantastic idea. And it's a musical. It's quite mad. But it's been nominated 11 times here. Jacques Audiard did a great job. It's not the film for everyone, but I'm glad to see a film like this doing so well at the BAFTAs.
And let's get into the nominations themselves now. What were the nods and snubs that surprised you the most?
Let's talk about the snubs, because there's been quite a few of those. First of all, I was shocked to hear actually that Denzel Washington has never been nominated for a BAFTA. And still, he's not nominated. Wow. There was some expectation that he'll be nominated for Gladiator 2. Gladiator, of course, not loved by critics, but his acting, I think, people said, that's a surefire nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Daniel Craig for Queer. Nothing for Daniel Craig. That was a shock to me. And nothing for either of Luca Guadagnino's films this year, which is Challengers and Queer. No Nicole Kidman for Best Actress for Baby Girl as well. So plenty of snubs. And surprises. A little bit less surprises, but Hugh Grant for Best Actor in Heretic. Well deserved. I think he did a great job there. And I love that The Substance, which is one of my favorite films, is still getting so much love. And Coralie Farget, she's been nominated for Best Director. The only women nominated among 6. That's, and again, sure, the BAFTAs, they're part of the problem, but I think it's the industry in general. It's something much deeper than that as well.
And just finally, because I know you've seen so many of these films, you've spoken with so many of the actors and directors that are in these projects. So if you could pick only 2 winners from any category, from director to Best Picture to Best Leading Actor, who or what are you just dying to see take home an award?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll pick 3 very briefly.
Okay, we'll allow it.
Please, thank you so much. I think I'm still here for Best Film in a non English language. I'm Brazilian. I'm obsessed. So happy with the success. Fernando Torres is not there. but it's been nominated for the best foreign film. I think Demi Moore for The Substance, she is amazing, and she gave an excellent speech when she won for Best Actress at the Golden Globes for music or comedy. And I think for supporting actor, there's a film I haven't mentioned yet, Anora, which talks about the romance of a New York sex worker with the son of a Russian oligarch. But then this actor, Yura Borisov, I mean, he did such an excellent job as kind of the bodyguard of the son of the oligarch. And it's a very touching kind of acting, and I think he really deserved that award as well. So those are the three ones that I'm expecting.
That was Monocle's senior correspondent Fernanda Augusta Pacheco there talking to Anita Riotta. This is The Globalist.
UBS is a global financial services firm with over 150 years of heritage. Built on the unique dedication of our people, we bring fresh thinking and perspective to our work. We know that it takes a marriage of intelligence and heart to create lasting value for our clients. It's about having the right ideas, of course, but also about having one of the most accomplished systems and an unrivaled network of global experts. That's why at UBS, we pride ourselves on thinking smarter to make a real difference. Tune in to The Bulletin with UBS every week for the latest insights and opinions from UBS all around the world.
Now, for some in-house news. Greece, the Monocle Handbook is out today. It lovingly brings together the best the country has to offer in hospitality, cuisine and retail. Monocle's Tom Webb caught up with our book publishing deputy editor Amy van den Berg and our fashion director Natalie Theodosi to give us a little preview.
It has arrived, the Greece Handbook. It's here, in my hands. It's absolutely beautiful. Amy, congratulations on creating this. Are you proud?
I am so proud. I'm so excited. It was such a fun book to make, and I'm excited for everyone to check it out.
Now, it was fun to make because you got to travel a lot. How did you pick these locations?
So this is our fourth handbook. We had Portugal, Spain, France, and now Greece. And so we have a pretty good system of, how to find the best places. The first step is asking friends of Monocle, people that we know and trust. Greek friends is very important. And also doing the research on the ground, which was the fun part of making the book as well, because I did get to go to Greece. And when we're in Greece, we're meeting people, we're asking questions, we're keeping our eyes open. And a lot of the places that we ended up featuring in the book were found through word of mouth, which really is, I think, the best way to make a book like this.
And these people that you meet, they're giving their recommendations, but it goes beyond travel recommendations. They're giving you advice how to live in Greece. And what exactly did you look for when you were finding these people?
When I was meeting people in Greece, I was just looking for things that made them excited about their country. So when I went to Crete, for example, I met Iliana Mahalin, who's a winemaker, and I was asking her what she loves about Crete, because I was my first time in the island, and I wanted to know from her perspective what makes Crete a special place. And she told me that, you should go to this town, you should go to this place, because this is the place that has the most exciting wine. This is the place that has the most exciting, retail industry. You should go to this town, Margaritas, which is famous for ceramics. And so I then, after talking to her, took the car, my rental car, and I went around Crete, and I was following her points of advice. And I met these really wonderful people, and she had texted them beforehand and said, look, this person from Monocle's on their way. She wants to know about ceramics. Please, invite her into your studio. And that's mostly how it works, really.
And Natalie, thank you for joining us. You are no stranger to Greece. Now, there must be some highlights in this book that you've had a hand in as well.
as you would expect, given my job, a lot of the fashion and retail section is my highlight. I was lucky to travel to Athens for a Monocle story in the magazine around March, just before the research for the book started happening. And even for me, I'm from Cyprus, so very nearby, but I hadn't gone to Athens and spent proper time there in quite a while. And it was amazing to see how the city had really transformed. And there's so much new talent and energy and a lot of creativity happening in Athens and across Greece. And I think that translates in the fashion and retail section in the book, where we feature some incredible new names, some of the established ones from brands like Zeus and Dion, which have become household names in Athens, but also very small new names like Afilo is a brand by two young artists and jewelry makers. And what really struck out to me with that is that they are now based in a neighborhood that you could not even walk in a few years ago because it was so dangerous. But there's been so much development that now neighborhoods have completely transformed, and this is true in Exarchia, in other parts of town. And it's amazing to see young people taking these places over and starting new businesses and choosing to stay in Greece, to start new ventures and to really highlight their heritage and the craft and everything that is happening in the country, because in the past there was a lot more desire, I think, either to leave or to buy into everything that was foreign.
And why should people be purchasing this book and heading to Greece in 2025?
Well, I'm biased, being a Greek Cypriot, so you should always, I can imagine summer, especially without going to Greece. But I think in the book you'll find a mix of everything. There's practical tips, where to eat, where to shop, where to travel. And of course, there's a lot of coverage of the beautiful islands to go to in the summer, but also Greece has so much to offer year-round, so it's a book that can really tell you where to go.
Amy,
yes.
Very quickly, which off-the-beaten track do you recommend we all go discover?
Oh my gosh, I ended up driving across the Peloponnese to discover places around there and check them out. On the way, I stopped by a Poro hotel. It's kind of like a guest house, and it's situated in an olive grove. It's so gorgeous. And then I kept going down the winding road around the Peloponnese, which is just a really, really beautiful landscape. There's mountains, there's sea. It's just really, really, really gorgeous. And I ended up going to a hotel named Ksenia, which is in the book. That was a lovely place. And then my last stop on that road trip was this really small, quaint, authentic taverna called Lila's Taverna, and I ended up sitting there with the owner, and we just spoke about the Pirates of Manny, which is really interesting, and I could tell you about it later. But I would say the Peloponnese was a really interesting place to travel to.
That was Monocle's Tom Webb, Amy Vandenberg and Natalie Theodosi. And Greece, the Monocle Handbook, launches today and can be found exclusively in Monocle shops. This is The Globalist. Finally, with the time nudging at 7:53 here in London, let's talk technology. David Phelan is Monocle's tech correspondent. I'm delighted to say he joined me in the studio. Good morning, David. How are you from your return from Las Vegas? Have you recovered?
I'm in recovery, I would say. Still adjusting from one time zone to another, but yes, pretty good, thank you.
What did the Consumer Electronics Show do for you this year? Because it looked completely off its head.
Yes, it really was. It was back to full strength in terms of capacity, people in your way all the time. You could not get in line for a Starbucks took 25 minutes. But obviously that's not what it's about. It's about the tech. But AI is in everything now, whether you want it or not. And sometimes it's useful. Other times, in a toothbrush, for example, it's you can manage perfectly well with just pressure sensors. But the AI going everywhere, I think, was the big story.
Thank you for that. So you have now transformed yourself into the J.R.R. Tolkien of Monocle Radio, because you bring us one ring to unite us all. You brought a ring in for me to see today. That's the goodies.
Yes.
What do you hold in your hand, David?
So, smart rings were also a big story at CES. Wearables generally, but wearables. This is the Samsung Galaxy Ring. It came out last year. It's just been updated so you can get it in more sizes. Now you can lift it off its little plinth. Very cleverly, that's a charging case as well as a place you can keep it.
It has almost a quality like you've just handed me some sort of athletic medal that lights up. That I've won something, or I've run really fast somewhere, or my resting heart rate has beaten everybody else's. It is very beautiful, obviously, because everything that you bring is very beautiful. So what am I holding in my hand? For a ring for clearly a large farmer. It's a very... What do they have in it? It's a huge
if it's my
ring.
middle finger, I will tell you, that is a size 12. That is one of the largest sizes.
Yes, that's big.
But inside it has sensors, so it can measure your heart rate, it can track your temperature. One of the things it does is that if you want to just check your heart rate, you can tap on your Samsung Galaxy phone and it will cause the ring to take a measurement.
To do its thing.
Exactly.
Right, okay. How far ahead of the game is this latest product? I mean, it is stunningly beautiful, but obviously it has to be useful as well. I'm going to hand it back to you because I can't actually get it back onto its little plinth.
Don't worry, I can do that.
I don't want to break it.
It's pretty advanced, though I would say not as advanced as the Aura ring, which I'm now
And is that what you're wearing
passing
now?
Yes.
This is lovely. It's like I'm being proposed to a million times. I have done it's quite a titus.
That you'll see is a dark, matte black colour, which they call Stealth. And this is the Aura Ring 4,
right.
Which has just come out a month or so ago, and it's a newer design. It's lighter, it's slimmer, it has better, faster, more accurate sensors, and it includes something called Symptom Radar. Generation 3 also has this, which is very clever. It means that if overnight it tracks your temperature and heart rate and it thinks you're coming down with a cold or flu or COVID, it can't tell between the three. In the morning, it will say, we think you're coming down with something. So it tells you can wrap up or take care or not exert yourself. And usually, and it's done this for me a couple of times, it's before I have any inkling there are symptoms.
For someone who wears it, do they act as reassurance or worry beads?
Well, that depends on the person. For me, I find it reassuring. I wake up, I look at my sleep and I think, I'm so exhausted. And then I look at my sleep and say, oh, actually, no, I did get 7 hours. And then I feel better automatically.
There was a wonderful survey that some technology experts at Loughborough University did with fitness trackers. And what they did is they made, they skewed the figures to make everybody think they'd only had 5 hours sleep. And they were all exhausted for the rest of the day, even though quite a lot of them had put in a good full solid 8 hours. And it questioned the reliability actually of fitness trackers and things like that. I mean, is there a general consensus that these things actually do the job very well?
I think it depends what you're looking for. For example, the Apple Watch can do an ECG and it can do heart rate monitoring, and they have calibrated that very carefully against professional hospital equipment. And for those things, they're right. It's difficult to get your step measurements exactly right because that's based on an average of height and so on. Again, that's where some that have heart tracking in it come out better because they can go on more than just how long your stride length would be.
Thank you for talking about the rings. Let's talk about Samsung. You showed us the ring there of the latest health ring from Samsung. But we're now looking ahead to Samsung next week. Huge event for them. What's happening?
Yes, this is their big flagship phone series for the spring. And sometimes they used to do it at CES, sometimes they do it in March. Now they've settled into a routine of having a big event in San Jose, Apple's backyard, to announce the Samsung Galaxy S25, S25 Plus and S25 Ultra.
And how much of the details of what we are expected to see next week have already come out into the public domain? That's a massive problem each year, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I won't say they've given up, but I think now companies like Samsung are learning to work the system now where they reveal deliberately little things and then still more leaks out. We know that we're going to get improved cameras. There's going to be a new design, the S24 Ultra, which is basically the same as the S23 Ultra in
You're
design.
showing me a wonderful phone now. Is this the S20...
This is the S24 Ultra, the one that came out this time last year. And we anticipate that there will be the same kind of dual quality to the raised rings for the cameras, for example, but we don't know what will be inside or what the sensors will be, or how much new Galaxy intelligence, as they call it, will be in Galaxy AI.
Galaxy intelligence obviously taking on Apple intelligence.
Absolutely. Samsung will say they got there first. They did, in fact. This time last year, they introduced features like if you're making a phone call to someone in Japan to book a table for dinner, it will translate your words as soon as you've said them into Japanese and then translate the other person's words back into English, so you can feel confident you really have booked a table for 4 people at 7 p.m. instead of 7 people for 4 a.m.
And this whole idea that, I mean, we talked about AI being everywhere in Las Vegas last week. We've looked at the introduction of AI into iPhones, and we just talked about automatic translation there. I mean, how much is actually that an incentive for people to buy their phones now, or is it just something that we haven't really paid that much attention to?
Yes, I think that's a really good question. Apple and Samsung both want you to say this is the most revolutionary thing. It's going to transform everything, and it probably is, but we are still in the foothills. So that translation feature is great. It works really well, and there's lots of things like photo editing, so you can take someone out of a photograph once you've taken it to if they've photobombed it, and the way it's doing that is getting better and better. It's almost Photoshop level quality now, but even so, I think there is a long way to go before people think this is what I'm going to buy a phone for.
Let's continue with the subject of phones, but with Apple. We can buy 4 different Apple iPhones now, can't we?
Yes, 5 technically. There are 4 in the iPhone 16 range, plus the elderly iPhone SE, which is about, we think, to be phased out and replaced in the spring.
Which is a shame, because everybody wants to buy them for their kids.
Yes. This is the time to buy it. That's going to be replaced by a new iPhone SE, but that looks like that'll be more expensive. When the iPhone 17 series comes out in the fall, obviously we're looking ahead a bit now, Apple's always had a bit of a problem with one of the phones in the range. There's the iPhone, then the iPhone Pro and the iPhone Pro Max. They all sell really, really well. But then there's the middle child, as it were. For a time, there was the iPhone 12 mini and iPhone 13 mini. They didn't do that well. So then they brought out a bigger one called the iPhone 14 Plus, iPhone 15 Plus. Again, it's not been what they want, so it looks like there's going to be a new one called the iPhone 17 Air, which is going to be deliberately super thin, perhaps as thin as 5.5 millimetres. The current iPhone 16 Pro is 8.25 millimetres. That doesn't sound that much different, but I think if you got a phone that thin, it would be remarkably thin.
What is it compromising then? Because if it is going to be smaller, it's either got to be smarter or has dropped things.
I think it's going to drop things.
Wow.
It probably will just have one camera. That's what all the reports are saying at the moment, instead of the 2 on the iPhone 16 and the 3 on the iPhone 16 Pro. So in other words, it will very much be a style phone rather than necessarily substance. They may also, interestingly, not have room for a SIM card. So it may be the first iPhone outside the US to have to use an electronic SIM, an eSIM, rather than a SIM you push into a SIM tray.
David Phelan, thank you so much for joining me in the studio. And that's all the time we have for today's programme. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producers, Chris Chermak, Anita Riotta and Hassan Anderson. Our researcher was Maisie Ringer and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield. After the headlines, more music is on the way and Chris Chermak will be back to bring you the briefing live at midday here in London. The Globalist returns at the same time tomorrow. I hope you can join me for that if you can. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening.